Hey everyone, welcome first-time listeners and returners to the Sports Deli, where thoughtful conversations and insightful guests are always tops on the menu. Tonight we will continue our discussion on contemporary social, educational, and sport issues. We hope you enjoy your experience with us as we try our best to have fun while listening and learning and doing our best to pay things forward. We're so grateful to our sponsor, SportRx. You can find them online at sportrx.com or call them at 888 831 5817. They are the leader in sports prescription eyewear. So, again, you can go to sportrx.com and enter the code DELI10 for your 10% discount. SportRx has men's, women's, and kids' frames. They have goggles, anything from sports to casual wear, and you can use your vision insurance, your flexible spending accounts, or your health savings accounts. Again, reach out to them at 888 831 5817 or find them online at sportrx.com, the leader in sports prescription eyewear. You can always send us an email to thesportsdeli, deli is DELI, thesportsdeli@gmail.com, or you can DM us on Instagram at Mike Hootner or on Twitter at Michael Hootner. And now back to the Sports Deli. We are now joined by Lindsay Gottlieb, assistant basketball coach for the NBA's Cleveland Cavaliers. And Coach, we can't thank you enough for finding time to come share space with us here in the Sports Deli. I know this is an incredibly busy time, a stressful time between trying to balance your family, your amazing son Jordan and your husband Patrick have been troopers through all of this between last year and this year, and supportive of your transition from the college game to the pro ranks, and the fact that you have only an 18-day training camp, a condensed version of it. There's only 4 preseason games, and then you're back at it again on the 23rd of December, and trying to learn the personalities of the new players and help everybody mesh. And you're under a new coaching staff with Coach Bickerstaff, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But it's a real honor to have you here. And for those of you that don't know much about Coach Gottlieb, she's from Scarsdale, New York, about 45 minutes north of New York City. She played high school basketball. She tore her ACL as a senior, and that allowed her to see things from a different perspective and helped her realize that she really wanted to coach one day. And then she went to Brown in the Ivy League and earned her bachelor's degree in political science. And she went overseas during her time at Brown to get away from the game for a little bit. Her mom had passed away, and it was a hard time. And she came back rejuvenated and finished her career at Brown. And then she went to Syracuse and earned her master's degree with a philosophy of education from Syracuse University in upstate New York. And then she's going to, share with us some of her experiences since then and how she got to where she is today. You can find her on Twitter, where she has over 18,000 followers, at Coach Lindsay, the letter G. Lindsay is spelled Lindsay, at Coach Lindsay G. And that is also the same name that you can find her on Instagram. She's been involved with USA Basketball. And her father, Stephen Gottlieb, was a civil court judge in Queens County for 2 decades and was later appointed to the state Supreme Court. And again, we're so honored that you're joining us here today. And Coach Gottlieb, welcome to the Sports Deli.
Well, thanks so much for having me. That's the full rundown. You didn't miss anything. I thought you were going to give the name of my second grade teacher, or when I got in trouble in junior high. But appreciate the kind welcome, and happy to be here and talk some hoops.
So, Coach, I want to start with this. And I know you've lost a lot of things in your life. You lost your mom when you were in college. You tore your ACL as a high school senior. You had an incident with your son and your husband, a public incident that went viral on Twitter. Um, but everything you've touched seems to turn to gold. You seem to make all the right decisions. You know what buttons to push. Um, you seem to have incredible relationships with people, no matter where it is or who it's with. And I just think that's mind blowing. It's remarkable. It's so admirable and something we should all strive for. So I'd like you to maybe reflect on that a little bit and talk to everyone. There's a lot of girls listening, a lot of boys, a lot of professionals, maybe a lot of people in corporate America, other coaches that could learn so much from your style, right? Obviously, everybody should be themselves, but there's just something different about how you approach life and basketball and people. And so you have that it factor, and not everybody has it. So talk a little bit about how you think that's played such a significant role in helping you to be where you are now.
Oh, well, I mean, I really appreciate it. I think that's, one of the highest compliments I've received. When it comes to basketball, I mean, I'll say this till I have no more breath. You have to have great players and great people around you. And, in my 8 years at Cal, 7 NCAA tournaments are because of the players. And especially in collegiate athletics, a lot of times it becomes about the coach, like the coach is the face of the program, or, the coach makes all the money and all that kind of stuff. But there's no question that each opportunity I've been given would not have come if it wasn't for, having talented players that were able to buy into everything that we were trying to do. So I'll speak about players before I speak about anything. In terms of my own style, I would say my approach to coaching is about relationships, and it's about preparation, right? I think you have to know what you're doing. You have to study your craft. You have to be prepared and have a plan, but you also have to be able to impart that wisdom through relationships, and the ability to connect to people. And I think that if I have something that differentiates me, it's the ability to try to gain the knowledge, but then have the relationship so that knowledge becomes meaningful to other people. And yeah, if that's a secret sauce, I guess that's what I'm rolling with.
Well, you've been rolling with it for a long time, either as a player, your teammates say the same thing about you, or Hall of Fame coaches like Tara Vanderveer, Heidi, at UCSD, everybody seems to have the same, Colin Sexton, with the Cleveland Cavs, a young, potential Hall of Famer down the road. He's got so many gifts that you've established this bond with. And so, how do you consistently know what to look for in someone when things aren't going right? Because they don't tell you everything, but you have to pay attention to some of those red flags or the clues that come up. And how do you know how to approach, or broach the subject with it doesn't matter the gender. It just
Right.
how did you get so good at that?
Well, I think it starts from, your purpose. And for me, coaching, really is about serving the team, serving the players, making other people great at what it is they want to do. I mean, I played basketball and I loved it, but I realized pretty quickly that it wasn't going to be my career as a player. And when I got into coaching, and even as a teammate, I thought about, okay, how can I make this team better? How can I serve these players? And I think when that's your mindset and that's your perspective, it literally changes how you walk into the gym and how you approach, who can I sort of, help, touch, contribute to their success. So I also kind of believe in it's not about, having a rigid, this is the only way you play, or this is the only way you approach this defensive issue or problem. It's trying to think about the mindset of someone else. How are they seeing it? And obviously you got to get them to where you're going philosophically as a coach. But if you can think about, as a player, how they might be thinking, whether it's about a basketball thing or how they might be feeling, if you can connect on that level, you're just going to have a better chance to bring them where they want to go or where they need to go.
Yeah, definitely. It's so interesting. Come to mind with the people that you've been involved with and some of your mentors. Talk a little bit about some of your mentors that helped you, especially when you went to Richmond and then later to Cal before you became a head coach at
Right.
Cal.
So you kind of lead me right into it. I was going to talk about Joanne Boyle.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned, I sort of realized while I was in college that I wanted to be a college coach. And my best friend from high school was a phenomenal basketball player. She went to Duke. Her name
Hmm.
was Hillary Howard at the time. It's now Hillary Hike. But when she
Hmm.
was being recruited by everyone, I got to know a lot of great coaches just through her recruiting process. She was recruited by Gino at UConn and by Debbie Ryan at Virginia and by Gail Gestencourse and her staff at Duke. So she ultimately chose Duke, and I got to know her coaching staff, one of whom was Joanne Boyle.
Mm.
Uh, and I vividly remember when I was a senior in college and our season was done at Brown, and Duke was hosting the first and second rounds of the NCAA tournament. So I flew down there to, support my friend and,
Mm.
watch some good basketball. And I went to her shoot around. So you're talking about shoot around in the NCAA tournament. You're hosting an NCAA tournament game, and
Hmm.
we're in Cameron Indoor, and shoot around ends. And Joanne sat with me in the bleachers and was like, "So I hear you want to get into coaching, And we talked for an hour. We talked
Wow.
about, why she loved coaching, what it was about, how I might get my foot in the door. And she told me later, she left that meeting and said, "Someday, if I get a head coaching job, I'm going to hire Lindsay." And I left that meeting saying, "Someday, I want to work for her." And sure enough, a couple of years later, so I got a job at Syracuse right after I graduated, and then I was at the University of New Hampshire, and then Joanne got her first head coaching job at the University of Richmond and asked me to come with her. So that was,
Wow.
if I had to say, a big break, so to speak, in basketball. And I tell people all the time who are young and getting into it, they say, "Well, what job should I take? Should I take the
Mm.
job at the biggest school, or should I take the job where I can be on the floor coaching earliest?" And I say, regardless of the title or where it is, it's about the people that you're working for, because that's going to determine how much you love your job, how much you learn, how much you're allowed to do. And Joanne was wonderful for me because she was a first time head coach and essentially said, "Hey, let's do this together." So I just got to see everything about what it meant to run a program. And she was so good at it. And then we were successful at Richmond, and she took the job at Cal, and I got to see her do it again in a foreign kind of land, the West Coast and the Pac-12. And her second time doing it. And so I would say, the ability to work with Joanne was tremendous for me. And she's been a great mentor the entire time. And then I've learned from a lot of other people. I mean, the proximity to, Tara Vanderveer, you mentioned her. She's about any day now going to, tie Pat Summitt's record for all-time wins in women's college basketball. She's currently the
Yeah.
number one team in the country. I mean, I don't even think it gets talked about enough what a great coach she is. So just the
Mm.
proximity across the bay to be able to coach against her and pick her brain
Mm.
was wonderful, for my career. And then now shifting to this level, I think it was a unique experience that I started out with JB Bickerstaff as, the
Mm.
lead assistant here. So I could pick his
Amazing.
brain on everything. And now, obviously he's become the head coach. So that's been great, for me to learn from someone who's been in the NBA his entire adult life.
Yeah, and he learned from his dad, obviously.
Exactly.
And yeah, and people don't realize this. The coaching tree from the University of San Diego. I don't even know if you know this, but
I
Pop
do.
Pop was right. Pop was here. Musselman, Mike Brown. I
Fizdale.
mean, Fizdale. Nobody knows this. Like the University of San Diego is just the most unbelievable coaching tree. And so you talk about Coach Bickerstaff. What's the difference between him and Coach Beilein? Because obviously Beilein's a great coach, right? You don't win as much as he did. It just wasn't maybe a good fit.
Right.
But what's the difference between the two styles, and what have, because you just love to learn, right? So you're
Yeah.
just under a different regime now, and just turning the page, and just trying to move forward and continue those relationships, and like Kevin Eastman said when he was on the other day, like, you better bring your Hall of Fame every day because they're expecting it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. And I would say, working with JB is so interesting and kind of enlightening for me because we're about the same age, and he came out of
Mm.
college and pretty much went right into the NBA, and I came out
Mm.
of college and went right into women's college basketball. And so, we've spent our entire adult lives coaching, but he's been in the NBA the entire time, and I was in college the entire time. Coach Beilein was in college, his entire time. So the differences are more in JB's nuanced understanding of the NBA. And I mean, from
Mm.
offensive and defensive schemes to what makes guys tick to how you handle training camp versus 3 games in 4 nights. And it's just JB blows me away with his knowledge and his skill in dealing with people, because you need both.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Coach Milan and I remain close. I learned a ton from him as well,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like just even going through this, training camp with JB, it's leaning on his knowledge of the NBA, but also willingness to innovate and not just do things because they've always done that way, which this COVID times kind of forces you to do that as well. But yeah, it's just trying to soak up as much information and knowledge from JB as I can every single minute of every day.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's a long season too. You gotta have some in-season adjustments for sure. And tell everybody about how obviously it's different than what the bubble was like, but tell everyone about this mini bubble and how, there's been some cases of COVID across the league, 40 the last time I checked. And, that's not a high number, but it's still something that you got to monitor, and you guys are going through, probably daily tests and just, give everyone an idea of how insanely different it is from the beginning of last year to
Right, right.
now.
Funny, it's my second year in the NBA, and neither year has been entirely smooth, right? We had a coaching change in year one, and now we're in COVID. So at some point, maybe I'll get a smoother year. But so as everyone knows, there was the bubble in Orlando, which was wildly successful relative to keeping COVID out. I mean, it was a true bubble.
Yeah.
So for the 8 teams that weren't in Orlando, we replicated that bubble in September, because we were obviously lobbying the league to say we need to be able to do something with our guys. We don't want them to be off for 9-10 months and then try to play. And so they allowed us to do that mini bubble, but we had to follow literally the exact protocols of Orlando. So we were in a bubble when we first got into the hotel. There was 36 hours of not seeing anybody else, and kind of the in-room quarantine. And then we got out of the in-room quarantine, and you're doing things, but it was sort of, we were bubbled together, and a lot of it was about bonding too, so meals together and things like that. And it was like 9 or 10 days of that. Coming into training camp, the NBA didn't mandate bubbles, and we're going to have to approach this season without a bubble. So the NBA will deal with its first cases of COVID. There have been, as guys came back into the market, but we as an organization decided training camp is so important to us. We are young. We didn't play in Orlando. We need this time. So, I think
there's only 18 days also. You only have 18 days.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
So, right. And so our thought is, to limit exposure as much as possible. We spent the first, 5 or 6 days of training camp in a hotel, just simply to, not have everyone kind of go home to their family, and, then you widen your own circle, so to speak. So it's a commitment by our guys. I think this organization, I mean, everyone in the NBA is really committed to these protocols that are pretty extensive. But it was just one extra layer of protection to make sure we could get through training camp without, the chance of, the virus spreading amongst multiple people, which obviously it hasn't. In terms of the NBA protocols going forward, there's a 158-page book. But the main thing is there's multiple testing per day. We have protocols within the building. There's, sort of tier 1 employees who kind of are around the players when they don't have masks on, and the only time they don't have masks on is during practice. But we have to have certain protocols to make sure then that there's nothing going on there, and just being really disciplined and really strict about the way we conduct ourselves every day, so that we can get through the season in a healthy way. And I think these are layered protocols in there, so that should one person get it, like from the outside or from their own pod, then they're not spreading it to other people, because that's what you're hearing. Even the doctors and nurses who are contracting the virus, they're not getting it in the hospital, they're getting it at home or in the community, but then they're not spreading it within the hospital, because hospitals have great protocols. So that's kind of our idea, that should someone get it, we want to make sure it's not going to anybody else. And this organization, I will say, the league has incredible leadership, and this organization takes every extra step. If there's an expense for something, we're going to pay it to make sure everybody's comfortable, safe as possible. Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse has like this air filtration system that cleans the air, and all of that. So I feel very fortunate to be part of an organization that has been a leader during this, really hard time, in terms of trying to do things the right way and make it a place that our guys can continue to grow and develop, even though we're, got our backs against the wall in some ways.
Yeah. Talk about your owner, Dan Gilbert. Him and LeBron had their professional back and forth or whatever, but he came back and he's done a lot for the city of Detroit. He's put a lot of money into the city to help it rebuild it. He's got a home there. Obviously you can't be successful again at that level if you don't do a lot of things right. Talk about your time with him. I know you had your first scouting report last year during your first exhibition game at his plush house, and tell everyone about how that story is a good story.
Yeah.
You are listening to an interview with Lindsay Gottlieb, assistant basketball coach with the Cleveland Cavaliers. She started her coaching career at Syracuse University. She went on to New Hampshire as an assistant coach and then Richmond, and she helped them earn 3 trips to the NCAA tournament. She then went to Cal as an assistant, and then she was later an associate head coach at Cal from 2008 to 2011. She then went on to UC Santa Barbara as the head women's basketball coach, and she was named Big West Coach of the Year in 2008 and 2009, making an NCAA tournament appearance with that team. And then she went back to Cal as the head women's basketball coach from 2011 until 2019. As we mentioned earlier, she went to a Final Four in 2012, 2013, and she earned 7 trips to the NCAA tournament in 8 years. She left Cal to come to the Cleveland Cavaliers and sacrificed a lot of stability, including a $700,000 salary, and she was on track to make over $1 million a year as the head coach at Cal, as a leap of faith led her to the Cleveland Cavaliers. And now back to the interview with Lindsay Gottlieb, assistant basketball coach with the NBA's Cleveland Cavaliers in the Sports Deli.
Yeah, so we had an exhibition road trip last year, and we're at Detroit, and I think we're gonna have a day off, then we're gonna play at the Celtics. Well, this organization tries, I think, during every preseason to spend, some time at Dan Gilbert's home in Detroit. So we had played the Pistons, and it was the in-between day. We were going to go have lunch, at Dan's house as a nice kind of bonding event and to interface with him. Mm-hmm. Well, we were on the bus from Detroit out to Dan's house, which is a little bit, outside Detroit. And Coach Beeline says to me, so the word is the front office, and Dan, they want to see a scouting report, what goes into it. So are you ready with your Boston Scout? I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, I'll be ready. So here I am, not only my first scout in the NBA, but now I'm doing it, at the owner's home in front of the owner, his family, and the entire front office. But to tell you the truth, that moment presenting the scout, sitting on a sofa between Kevin Love and Tristan Thompson was the single most comfortable I had felt from the time I got the job. And that's because that's what I've done for my whole adult life, right? Scouting reports are scouting reports. There's not much different. There's a lot different about the rest of this life in comparison to what I was doing before, but not the ability to put together a game plan and a scout and the ability to deliver it, to people. So that's a funny story that was my first meeting of Dan. But to answer your original question about, my take on Dan Gilbert, I have been so just impressed, in awe of being an employee of the Rock family of companies, because we don't feel like we're just an employee of the Cavs organization. He's got a family of companies, and from StockX to Rocket Mortgage to Quicken Loans and to the Cavs. And so, obviously we have our little family of the Cavs, but sometimes we get emails, that come from that go to the whole family of companies. And there's a reason he is as successful as he is. And that's because there are principles, they call them isms, that run the company. The technology that's used just even for all of us to communicate and for the things that, that they do to take care of employees. It's been pretty unbelievable to see that in action. everything from the, the company website and how you, log on and see your benefits and all this kind of stuff to,
Wow.
to holidays and things like that. So it's been really neat. And then, Dan's son Grant works closely with the Cavs, doing some of the creative stuff, and he's so impressive. So it's been neat to see, business at the highest level. But obviously our focus is on the Cavs and this organization and what we need to do to get back to where we want to be, which is a playoff team.
Well, that's in alignment with you, right? He cares more about team. He cares about people, and he cares about, other things besides just the Cavs, even though that's, obviously very important to him. And so it made me think about a couple different things, but you have a biracial son, right? Your husband does he identify as African-American?
Yep. He's Black. Yep.
Okay. So he's Black. And so, I want you to talk a little bit to educate people more than anything else, because we're going through a racial reckoning. We've had Dr. Richard Lapchick on. We've had a number of people talk about this. And so to the people in the bubble, the players, the coaches were all on board last year, as well as the Wubble, right? The women did an amazing job, also the WNBA, and colleges, universities across the country, which, you were a part of that sorority. And I'm sure you're very proud of what they've done as well. Going into our second year of this, dealing with this racial reckoning and the civil rights movement, is that going to continue? Do you feel like the owners are doing enough? Do you feel, obviously the players are going to do enough, but you've admitted that there's white privilege. You're a part of white privilege. So am I. And we have this platform. You have a bigger one than I do, but do more white people, especially owners, have to, like Dan, have to do more to speak on it?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's a lot to tackle there. So to answer your question about, like, is it ongoing? It darn well better be ongoing, right? Like,
Yeah,
this is,
right.
It's not the type of thing that gets solved. I think it's systemic, right? So it takes a constant effort by everybody to first recognize that there's an issue, right? And I think the first thing to acknowledge is that, you're no less patriotic. You don't love this country any less if because you say, hey, there are problems here. We're not living up to what our, ideals are supposed to be. I think, in fact, that's one of the more patriotic things you can do. I care about this country enough to help get us to where it should be. So I think what this summer has been is just, maybe a reckoning point within an ongoing spectrum of history that you hope continues to push in a certain way. And I was really proud. I mean, just to speak for a second, you mentioned the Wubble, the women of the WNBA, particularly Black women who make up a majority of that league, have always been the first to stand up, to speak out, to do so at greater risk than anybody else, because they don't have millions and millions stored up in the bank. And also, the players of the NBA who showed a ton of courage, I think this summer, to say, this is the most important thing right now for us to speak on, and they still have to do their jobs, but to be able to bring the type of awareness that they did and do the work that they did, I think was incredible. And, going back to, you said, my time in college, I'm not surprised because of the women that I was around at Cal. People ask me all the time about, my willingness to use my platform, my willingness to say, particularly as a white female, where we have unique privilege. Oh, is it because, you have a Black husband or you have a biracial son? And number one, I would start with my parents, who, kind of gave me an understanding of the responsibility, relative to social justice. But even, before I had my son, to live in the world of Cal women's basketball, where I was surrounded by a mostly, Black team of women, and to see the world from their perspective. And to see the work that they did to try to, all the time, consciously and subconsciously break down barriers. Like, to me, that was one of the most inspirational, things about my time at Cal. And so now I feel like it's just the beginning, hopefully, of people who can be allies, recognizing, what their role is. So I do think the owners, in the NBA were really receptive. This year, they quickly turned around, making all the arenas polling places. Rocket Mortgage was a polling place. we jumped on a Zoom call with Dan Gilbert at one point. I was so, really like pleased by just his true empathy with our players and wanting to, help them create change. But it's not just the owners in the NBA. I think across the country, the people who have money and the people who have power, need to continue to do things to diversify, the wealth gap, to diversify positions of power, and to just, make this country more equitable for all of its people.
Yeah, and just educate people a little bit about, what happened at the airport, and if someone sees that, how they should stand up and back someone that's going through that kind of situation.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I never sort of expected to kind of like blow up as much as it did in terms of the attention, but my husband and son and I had gone out to USA basketball to watch one of our Cal players taking part in tryout. And I think it was Memorial Day weekend. We were hustling back to the airport. We were actually kind of late, running a little bit late for the flight, as you might do with a baby. That's really hard
Right.
to get anywhere. And I remember walking up to the counter. Now mind you, I had just finished my first season. So our son was 1. He had traveled with me on every single road trip and every single recruiting trip up to that point. So I don't know, he had been on a lot of flights. So my son and I step up to the thing. My husband was kind of standing off to the side, and I get up to the counter, and my head was down, and I put the tickets and the documentation on, and I just said last name, Gottlieb, last name Martin, and I wasn't looking, and the woman kind of said, well, hello. And I looked up and I said, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to not say hello. We're just running late. And I said again, I was like, okay, there's a weird vibe here. And, she looked at us and she said, okay, Lindsay Gottlieb. And then she looked at my son, Jordan Martin. She said, well, how do I know he's your son? And I said, because I'm telling you, he's my son. And oh, by the way, here's his passport. And she said, oh, well, you have different last names. That, I need you to prove that he's your son. And I said, prove that he's my son. And she's like, well, there's some issues. And I said, okay, I get there's issue. Here's his passport. It does say, at that point, my husband jumped in and he said, his passport is right there. It says Jordan Peter Gottlieb Martin Gottlieb. See, Gottlieb's on there too. And I said, who cares if it doesn't say Gottlieb? We don't have to have the same last name. This is our family. This is my son. She said, well, do you have like a Facebook photo or something to show that you were at the birth? I said,
wow.
Wait a second. I said, there are a lot of different kinds of family. What if he was adopted? What if he, all I need is he's flown 50 times. Well, you need the birth certificate. I said, well, you can't get a passport without a birth certificate. So there's this like to do at the thing. And I start to get a little emotional because I sort of think I know why she's questioning us, because we all, look differently. My husband was there too. And then a woman next door to us in the next thing, all white family, kindly looked over and said, I just need to intervene. She said, I have a different last name as my family, and we've never been stopped. So why are you stopping these people? And then she just kind of backed off and gave us our stuff. And so now we're really late for the flight because that whole fiasco took 20 minutes. And so I'm kind of like hustling, and my husband is upset, and I see a manager, and I said, I'm really upset right now. I'm trying to keep it together. I said, but we better not miss our flight because this woman wouldn't let our family through. And he said, I'll radio to the gate. Don't you worry. We'll handle it. And then he radios us ahead. So then I get an alert that our flight was an hour and a half delayed. So I kind of just breathed. And that's when, if it was old days and there was no social media, you would call the company and you would say, hey, this is what happened and this isn't okay. You need more diversity training with your staff or what have you. But it's because it's not, the old times. It's faster to I just tweeted at them and say, hey, this just happened. I think it's, it was because the way our family looked at it. And then I shut my phone off and went to go play with my kid for an hour while we were on the delay. And I turned my phone back on and, NBC News is calling and, CNN and all this. And I think partly that was because the next day was the Starbucks.
Oh boy.
Do you remember that Starbucks incident,
Oh
and
yeah.
so it was their day of whatever they were doing that next day. They were shutting all the stores or something over diversity. So I think it was there was a little bit more to it. And look, my ultimate takeaway is I'm a white female who never gets stopped anywhere because I'm a white female, right? Like I go through security things. I don't, worry about a traffic stop. I don't, I live in that privileged world. But I do remember, again, when I was at Cal, walking through airports with, women who looked different than me. They would get stopped more often. They would get asked questions. And so I did feel like, in the moment where I might have more of a platform to say, it's not okay to profile people. There are families that look different ways. There are, people with different last names and all that kind of stuff. And I get that child trafficking is a real thing, and I'm not trying to minimize that. But if you were in the moment with us, the woman was looking at my husband, was looking at me, was looking at my son, and didn't like the way we looked, flat out. It was, pretty clear to me. And so I just felt like it was, there was an onus, on me to say, hey, this isn't okay. And this happens to other people all the time that don't look like me. And then I just kind of wanted to drop it a little bit because I just felt like, there was
Good
a
luck
lot
dropping
of,
it.
yeah, no, that could have gone to, places that, people who need that attention more.
So the person that stood up for you, they were white?
So get this. Okay. So she was a white woman. So at the time, the woman was like, well, you have a different last name. And she never said, well, how do I know he's your son? He's black, you're white. And I'm like, my husband, but that woman at the time, it was about that, well, I can't necessarily trust that he's yours because he's a different last name. And she said, well, wait a second, I don't have my husband's last name and we don't get stopped. So, I thanked them, for being supportive, and I moved it along. Well, when this whole thing blows up on Twitter, she wrote something on Twitter and said, I'm actually an Associated Press news writer. I was the woman right next door. I saw this happening and it wasn't okay. And that's when I spoke up. And I was like, wow, like I didn't realize she was a journalist. But yeah, she was, I think she just sort of sensed the way it was going, and just her ability to kind of call it out stopped the whole thing, And so that's also was a good lesson to me, that when you see something going on that just doesn't seem quite right, it's okay to, use your voice and help, and help people who are, being marginalized in some way.
Yeah. Well, fundamentally, that's something that you would think all people would adhere to, but doesn't it say more to the fact that we've seen more white people standing up and speaking out than we ever have, like this woman? And that's what we need to happen. You mentioned earlier about more wealthy people. Well, we're talking about wealthy white men, basically, is what we're talking about, that need to step up and really educate and put their money where their mouth is, so to speak,
For sure.
So let me talk about, because when you were at Cal, you were sort of ahead of the curve. And I think that's why, in a lot of respects, you're so respected and you've had so much success, because you're a forward thinker on so many levels. So, and talk about social media and the power of it and how you used it at Cal to promote the program. Because you see everyone now, right? They do the same thing. But you did that before that was really a thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think so. So I appreciate that. This was the mentality behind that. When Joanne Boyle took the job at Cal, Cal had 13 losing seasons in a row. And we were picked 8th out of 10 that year in what was then the Pac-10, now the Pac-12. So when you get a job and you sort of think about, okay, how are we going to turn this around? Like, what's going to be our thing? In college, there's so much more than just the basketball. In the NBA, it's the draft, it's basketball, it's development. But there's this whole recruiting thing and there's messaging. So when we sat down, and this is where Joanne gave me a lot of freedom, we sat down to try and say, okay, what is the messaging here? What's going to be our thing? I remember thinking we don't have Stanford's, championship pedigree to sell in recruiting because we don't have it. And at the time, USC had just built the Galen Center. I'm like, we don't, while we had a great arena, we didn't just have this brand new, sparkling arena to sell. What we had was a really great recruiting class with some big personalities and talented kids, Alexis Gray Lawson, Devon A. Hampton, Ashley Walker, Chantrell Sneed, Janae Morris. It was 5 like local kids. And so I remember talking to Joanne, like, I think we need to sell the here and now. I think we need to sell the people. I think we need to be progressive when it comes to, you want to be part of this, because of the humans in it. And how do you do that? You got to showcase those people. So back at that time, which was it must have been 2005, it was with more still photography and media guides, right? So that I think had an impact. So then I go, 3 years later, I get the head job at Santa Barbara.
Right.
And when I came back to Cal, uh, now it was 2011.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the still photography and the media guides was starting to become video, websites, social media, like more live action stuff, but it was the same concept. And my feeling was, and what you have to think about in recruiting a lot, and I will say, like, there's part of this, like, I really don't miss, and some that I do, like when you're recruiting, to me, everything should be about the experience you're providing for the people in your program, right? Like, that's where your focus is. But in college, you have to focus on the experience that you're providing. And oh yeah, we got to make sure all the stakeholders know what we're doing too. So it's like it's twofold, like you got to let recruits know, hey, this is what we're doing. We're not just doing it, but we got to let them know what we're doing. So I always challenge our staff to be the best of both. We have to actually be doing these things. We have to have a great academic support thing. We have to, be helping them learn to network and get jobs. We have to be doing great player development. We have to be, having good relationships with them. We have to be running good stuff. But at the same time, we have to be able to showcase what we're doing so people know us authentically. So that's what I tried to do. Cameras were allowed everywhere. We tried to do snippets of real life, so if the kids are in the office, someone's probably videotaping them so people see you're in the office. And there's a little part of that now kind of irks me slightly because it's, I just like being authentic and this is what it is, not having to tell anybody about it. But I think what it did was help to build the brand of our program. And by extension, the brand of those human beings. Mm-hmm. Because to me, the more people knew about Laisha Clarendon or Rashonda Gray or Brittany Boyd or Michaela Cowling or whoever, the more they were going to feel connected, and the way that we do things. And that ultimately, I think, we try to be as authentic with that as possible, which, hopefully helps you draw in players that want to be part of that, but also helps the players that are there feel seen, feel valued, and then, they're able to perform at their highest.
You are listening to an interview with Lindsay Gottlieb, assistant basketball coach with the NBA's Cleveland Cavaliers in her second season with the Cavs. This final segment of the Sports Deli podcast is sponsored by SportRx, the leader in sports prescription eyewear. You can find them online at sportrx.com or give them a call at 888-831-5817. If you buy anything online, be sure that you enter the code DELI10, the number 10, DELI10 for your 10% discount. Now back to the final segment of the interview with Lindsay Gottlieb, an assistant coach with the Cleveland Cavaliers in the Sports Deli. So talk a little bit about the Final Four experience for you and your team and your coaching staff and the university, because you know as well as I do that success goes a lot further than just wins and losses, right? You don't have to, get a lot of wins to be successful as a coach. But at the levels that you were coaching at, it does matter to a lot of people. I've coached for 29 years, right? I've been on the men's side for 15, and in the last 14, I've been on the women and the girls side. And people don't really understand the grind and the sacrifices and, how many things have to go right for you to, achieve that level of success. But, share with everybody what exactly that year was like and how proud you are of, that entire year. But, leading up to that, how you built the program to, be a perennial powerhouse while you were there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a great point that you don't have to win for there to be value in each of those journeys, right? I can tell you about each of my 8 years at Cal, and they're so meaningful. And even, the one where we didn't make the NCAA tournament, you learn a lot from the defeats and things like that. But the Final Four is magical. And that season to this day has not lost any of its luster in terms of how magical it felt. I joke with those players, there needs to be a 30 for 30 made. I mean, there were so many storylines and so many cool things. And yeah, as a coach, when people ask me, it was better than my wildest dreams, and not just, getting to New Orleans and, the actual Final Four, but the process. In terms of the grind, I mean, I tell people, the fact that we went 17-1 in that conference, and I think we played Stanford, in the Pac-12, you play your traveling partner kind of back to back in the same week, and we split with Stanford, and we were both 3-1. So it was really early in the season, and we all knew Stanford wasn't losing again. We just knew we had to win every single rest of the games to get a regular season championship, and we did it, and we did it emphatically. We did it with a come from behind wins, and the final game at Washington, I think we won by 27 points. We needed that to secure a Pac-12 championship. So that piece of it, to me, is as memorable as the winning the NCAA tournament games to get to the final four. But it was an incredible group of people. We made it through everything individually. They were remarkable as a group. It was so special, and it's not something that I take for granted ever.
And time flies, right? God, it probably seems like it was yesterday.
Yep.
So let me ask you one more question, and then we can get to this or that. And I want to leave the last part to you to talk about anything that you want to promote. You have something coming up in a couple days, a women's conference or a seminar or something like that I want you to talk about. But how have you been received? I know there's always going to be people out there. Well, she just got the job because she's a woman, and there's a lot of still good old boy network, that's going on. Did people reach out to you, like make an effort to reach you? Becky, obviously, with San Antonio, she's been doing this for a number of years, but there's probably still people that look to sort of like, okay, well, is this why she got the job? Or, and how have you been received by, the league? Obviously the players love you there. How has that been for you? And how do you handle those situations when that does happen?
So,
uh-oh.
No, I'm trying to think about how to go about it. It's interesting.
Yeah. Like, did LeBron call you? Like, did any players, like, even if they're from other teams, call you and say, wow, congrats?
So I don't know LeBron, like I know him personally, but yes, some guys like, Jaylen Brown, I know him from Cal. So he reached out, and, Steven Silas, who just got the head coaching job with the Rockets, he and I went to college together. So he reached out, people who had, a personal connection reached out, but, to answer your original question, the overall feedback was, wildly positive, right? I'm sure there are some, whatever, those keyboard warriors on Twitter saying, oh, she only got the job because she's a female. Here's what I would counter to that. And this is part of the reason I took the job, or, one of the reasons that was like my bigger picture thinking. Only got the job because she's a female, right? If I was a male in a Power 5 head coaching position with success, not at the risk of losing my job, the only job you take in the NBA was a head coaching job, right? I mean, let's be realistic, right? Yeah. Like, a Cal men's head coach, or, somebody in the equivalent, the head coach of Michigan, John Beilein, you're only leaving to go to the NBA if you're in that role to be a head coach. And I remember in thinking about this, I remember thinking, somebody who is in a sitting head coach has to do this so that at some point, the notion of thinking about sitting head coaches in women's college basketball for NBA jobs becomes more of a norm. I look, now that I've been in it, there are not every college coach is suited to be in the NBA, men or women. It's pretty clear, right? But whether or not they are should not be kind of determined by their gender. It's whether or not you're more kind of predisposed to the college thing, where there's a certain style, or whether you're predisposed to the pro thing. So no one kind of significance was sort of like how this is the only reason she got the job. For me, it was also the trend was moving in that the NBA was starting to be more inclusive, and I was getting phone calls from people that I knew in the league, but they were more about, hey, how do we get more young people involved, right? And I that's great, because if we start getting 22-year-old women coming in, then they'll work their way up in the league, But if you're talking about now and significant change now, I think you have to be willing to go get women with a lot of experience. And that means,
Head coaches.
recruiting them. Yeah. Paying money and going to get the people you want and putting them in positions of, value and significance. And so that was my biggest thing with this job. Like I just wanted to make, and going from being a head coach to being an assistant is different. I hadn't been an assistant coach in 11 years. And I imagine I'll be a head coach again at some point. I liked being a head coach, but, you have to kind of shape the role in such of one that it has significance in order to get, higher level people. And so I think the way that the Cavs did that and the fact that they said, hey, we want, you to be a big part of this, that framed the narrative around here that, the feedback I got and the reception I got was really positive. And then I'll tell you about the guys in this league that's like been really clear to me. And I think it's, high level elite athletes, male or female, but they what they value is, do you know your stuff? Can you make me better?
Yep.
And do you care about me as a human being? They don't care if you're male or female. And if anything, if we consider that kind of empathy piece, like the do you care about me, if we consider that a more traditionally feminine characteristic, it might even help you be successful if you can connect, because men like connection just like women do, as long as you also know your stuff, and can make them better and can get them out of their comfort zone and get them to kind of work on the things that they want to work on. But the reception from these guys here, has been unbelievable, and really across the league for sure.
Yeah, that's so cool. So cool. And you used to go to the Golden State Warriors practices too, right? And boy, did he kicked himself, didn't he, for not offering you the job first?
Well, I don't know if they're kicking themselves, but yeah, that there are other people. I mean, Bob Myers reached out, and and Steve Kerr reached out. I think what they both kind of said in their own way is, well, we didn't know you were looking to do this, and I wasn't. Like I wasn't.
Right.
I was happy at Cal. I certainly wasn't shopping myself in any way, but there's my exact point, which is it wasn't in their mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I actually called Bob Myers like maybe the day or two before I actually took the job, just to pick his brain on like, do you think this is a good move? And at that point, he was kind of like, like, I wasn't trying to get a job offer out of him, but I could tell he was sort of like, gosh, I didn't know, this was in your mindset. And like I said, it wasn't, but until people, put things out there, your mind really has to change, and so I hope that, I was really doing this to try and help this organization, but you do hope that you change the mindset that when guys in this league, GMs or whatever are thinking about rounding out their staff or head coaches, my hope would be that at least they're open to thinking about who actually really is best for the staff. Is that someone from overseas? Is that someone who's been doing it for 10 years? Is it someone who's been coaching women? Is it someone who's been a head coach? I mean, every boardroom, every coaching staff, every leadership group, every, tech company, ownership group is better when there are different points of view at the table and different life experiences at the table. And, I think you do yourself a disservice if you only go to what you know or what you're comfortable with. And that's the idea of diversity. It makes rooms stronger. And so, hopefully now, if what I've done, I hope, is that it opens the door for people to think about, women in coaching and whether or not they could strengthen your staff.
I'm so glad you talked about diversity, having that definition and not the traditional definition that so many people think of, we got to have a diverse staff. We got to have someone Black, or African-American on the staff. It's so not about that. It's so about what you just described.
Right.
What did you learn real quick about the practices or games that you went to with the Warriors? Like, I mean, there's some different personalities there, and, Steve Kerr is amazing. The players there obviously are Hall of Fame players. Like, how was that experience?
Well, I think the number one thing is you can't walk in that building, and be around that and not realize how strong the culture is. And I think the thing that stuck out to me the most, and I don't know if this is the case in every NBA place, but the GM, the head coach, and the best players were all in line, all in sync, right?
Yep.
And that's special. It's unique. Yep. And I think that's one of the things that has allowed them to be so great.
That's awesome. All right, let's get to the this or that. This is one of our fun parts of the podcast, so bear with us here. Okay, Mario Brothers or Tetris?
Tetris.
Okay. Ice the pick and roll, hedge and recover, or hug and go under?
See, now it's hard to answer at once. That means, are we coaching a women's college team?
Right here, I knew that was going to be your answer.
Yeah, I would say ice.
All right. Well, explain to everybody what icing is, because it's sort of new, but a lot of old school people don't even know what the heck you're talking about.
Right. So it often occurs. It's like a side pick and roll. The idea is you're essentially keeping the ball on one side of the floor, not even letting it get to the screen at all. You're just keeping it down, not letting the ball get back to the middle of the floor. Not allowing somebody to use the screen at all.
Yeah. So whichever way the back of the screener is, making them go opposite of their back.
Correct.
Awesome. Love that. Vacuum. Now, you've been married for how long?
A little over 2 years. Right. So we had our son before we got married. Marriage was like last on the list of things.
It was it was just like, hey, how about we do this for the rest of our lives? And you're like, okay, cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay. Vacuum or dishes?
Dishes.
Wow, he's a vacuumer. Interesting.
Well, that's just my own. Yeah, he is a vacuumer. He is a vacuumer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Waffles, pancakes, or French toast with challah?
Well, if you know me, it's really all three. I'm any carb over like omelets. And so when I lived in, Santa Barbara, it was a different spot for each one. But I'm going to go with the challah French toast.
Nice. All right. Okay, Ellen or Oprah?
Oprah.
Why?
I don't know. I always
you grew up on her, right?
I grew up on Oprah a little bit more. Yeah.
Chocolate or vanilla?
I'm a dessert person, if you can tell, because I have a hard time choosing. Like both, depending on the day. Ice cream, I would say vanilla, but there's definitely chocolate in my life in other areas. I'm not passing up on a lot of chocolate.
Right. Books or magazines?
Ooh, both. I read a lot of both, but right now I'd say I'm more into books.
What book are you reading?
Well, I just got the new Obama book.
Oh, wow.
Very long. So I read a little bit at a time.
That's cool. I hope to get to that real soon too. Probably in audio form though, and better when I'm driving. Yeah. Puzzles or board games?
Puzzles.
Witches or wizards?
Wizards.
So you're a Harry Potter fan.
I do love Harry Potter. I'm excited for my son to get old enough to either read it or have me read to it, because he has some Harry Potter pajamas. So he'll be like, oh, Harry Potter, but he doesn't really know. So I showed him the book the other day and I was like, see, there's no pictures in this book. You got to get a little better, but then we'll get to it. That's
awesome. Country, rock and roll, or R&B?
R&B.
So if you're driving in the car by yourself, what would you be singing out loud?
Nothing, because I have the worst voice in the history of the world, but more like old school R&B a little bit.
Whitney?
Like what's that?
Whitney.
Well, everyone loves Whitney, yes.
Yeah,
but like
right.
Boyz II Men, like that was my era more.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's cool. Maya Moore or Diana Taurasi?
Whew. For what? For what? Just starting a team with, drafting? Oh my gosh, Maya Moore.
All right. Well, what she's done off the court has been equally amazing, right?
Absolutely.
Wow. LeBron or Jordan? Sorry, coach.
LeBron. I'm sitting in the Cleveland Cavaliers. His picture's right out there with the championship. I don't know. I'd make it kicked out of the city if I said anything else.
That's right. That's a good call. Growing Pains or Full House?
Kind of neither, but if I had to go with one, Full House.
Okay. Beauty and the Beast or Aladdin?
Aladdin.
Wow. Blockbuster Video or Netflix?
Well, can't we all evolve? Like it was.
Right. Can't we all evolve?
Video moments, and now it's Netflix.
That's right. Well, Coach, we can't thank you enough for taking time out of your unbelievably busy schedule to share space with us in the Sports Deli. And is there anything else that you want to share with everyone before we let you go?
I think we're starting to do a better job of reaching out to one another, being a network to help one another. That's what the sports industry is. And so as women, I think we need to, to reach out a hand more often and lift others up. So I think it's a panel that helps, people who are striving to be in this business.
Yeah, we definitely want to change the narrative. You know, Vicki Johnson just got the head coaching job with the Dallas Wings, right? So glad
awesome.
that happened. Yeah. So, and across the NBA. And what else do you want to share with everyone? Any words of wisdom? You know, we want to wish you the best of luck, you know, with the season, and obviously everyone's doing what they can to stay safe, and just remarkable your journey. And I can't wait to continue to follow you and see where it leads you to. You'll definitely be a head coach again one day. It just depends on a lot of factors. You know, you got to get a little lucky. The timing's got to be right. You know, you got to balance your family and just sort of see where you are on the journey. And but it's definitely going to happen, and for sure, because you came into the sports deli and got some of that karma, coach.
Exactly. You got it.
Yeah.
You got it. But thank you for having me. This has been great. Really, really good stuff to talk about.
All right. Thanks, coach. Good luck and have a great rest of the day.
See you soon. Stay in touch.
Take care. All right. Sounds good.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, coach. Bye.
Bye.
We can't thank Lindsay Gottlieb, assistant basketball coach with the Cleveland Cavaliers, enough for coming and spending some time with us here in the Sports Deli. Remember, you can send us an email to thesportsdeli@gmail.com or DM us on Instagram @Mike Hootner or on Twitter @Michael Hootner. Please mask up. We implore you to mask up. The studies show that putting a mask on helps. It's not a red or blue thing. It is a humanitarian thing to save lives throughout this country. And until next time, we genuinely appreciate you listening to the interview with Lindsay Gottlieb from the Cleveland Cavaliers. And until next time, mask up, Black Lives Matter. Peace.